next presentation is entitled Transforming the National Air and Space Museum's Mannequins. Beth Knight is a textile conservator at the National Air and Space Museum. She's worked as a textile conservator on Girlhood, It's Complicated, at the National Museum of American History, and as an Andrew W. Mellon Fellow in Textile Conservation at the National Museum of the American Indian. She's active in the Washington Conservation Guild and AIC's Textile Specialty Group.
So Transformation is the multi-year renovation of the entire Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum's galleries, which I'll be referring to by its acronym NASM. Because it's such a large-scale undertaking, the museum is being renovated one half at a time. This talk will feature objects from the west end of the museum. Transformation began with artifact deinstallation in 2017. Our team of 7 to 10 conservators hired specifically for Transformation have treated a total of 1,211 objects. I started with the team in 2020, and with the help of our Mountmakers and the exhibits production department and my object conservator colleagues, we've treated and mounted 62 outfits and 19 accessories that you can now see in our recently reopened museum. When it came to deciding how to make our mannequins, we intentionally chose to make them all out of Ethafoam. This is because Ethafoam mannequins can be easily altered and have proven to be stable and inert, which is vital for our mixed media collections going on long-term display. The mannequins generally fell into 3 categories: hand-carved partial bodies or accessory inserts, altered Dorfman Conservation forms, and custom Ethafoam forms CNC milled from 3D scans. I'm very lucky at NASM to be surrounded by colleagues with varied hand skills right outside my door at the Udvar Hazy Center's Mary Baker Engen Restoration Hangar. So I'll be highlighting how our various departments collaborated to create some of our more challenging mannequins within the tight deadlines of wrapping up the West End. So you may be wondering what types of garments we even have at the National Air and Space Museum. A large part of our textile collection on display in the West End is more relatable to everyday wear, such as airline uniforms and flight suits. But we also have composite objects, such as spacesuits, and accessories like helmets, gloves, scarves, and shoes. Generally, our collection focuses on protective and functional garments. This often means that some components of an outfit are heavy, like all of this smoke jumper, or made of unstable materials, like this pressure suit. In order to understand how the entire outfit functions, the accessories are typically displayed on the mannequins, meaning that dangling components, such as the communication cables on this racing suit, need additional supports. In addition to the physical and material challenges, most of the outfits are associated with individual people and their stories. So the mannequins need to respectfully and accurately represent their bodies. It's very motivating to be as accurate as possible, especially when the individual is still alive. Today, I'll be covering 4 case studies of mannequins that were only possible because of collaboration between departments at NASM. They fall into 2 of those 3 Ethafoam mannequin categories. The first being CNC milled Ethafoam forms based on 3D scans, and the second being altered Dorfman Conservation forms. I'll start with our first 3D scanned form. This vest belonged to Gene Kranz, who was NASA's Chief of the Flight Control Division during the Apollo 13 mission, which was the 3rd lunar attempt that was aborted after an oxygen tank exploded in flight. Kranz was a key figure in mission control that helped bring the Apollo 13 crew home safely. Each mission control team was assigned a color, with Kranz leading the white team. During every mission that he led as flight controller, he wore a different white suit vest that was hand-sewn by his wife, Marta. He traditionally wore plain vests during the missions and fun patterns to celebrate the splashdowns. Because Apollo 13's successful completion wasn't certain until the very end, he stayed in his plain working vest through the splashdown. The challenge with this form was the efficient use of time and materials. Gene Kranz received the 2021 Michael Collins Trophy, a Lifetime Achievement Award given every year by the museum. This award was given months before the vest was slated for conservation or mount preparation. The museum wanted it prepared for a temporary display during the ceremony, but in the interest of efficiency, the mount also needed to work for its ultimate display in our destination moon gallery. There was no appropriately sized Ethafoam mannequin in our stock, and no time for me to custom carve a new mannequin in addition to meeting other impending deadlines. So this became an opportunity to try to find faster mannequin production methods. Fortunately, we did have a polyurethane foam male torso in our stock that was close to the approximate measurements, but obviously not archival. NASM's exhibit production team regularly 3D scanned our objects to measure and digitally design mounts and had produced components or body parts for mounts by CNC milling Ethafoam. We decided to use this mount as a feasibility test for producing full mannequins based on roughly padded stock forms. Because of the pace of this project, which we did in only a few short days, there's not many in-process photos. We started with padding out the torso with polyester batting and covering it with white stockinette, which we learned did not pick up well on the scanning unit and had to be covered with a matting spray. Exhibits production then rendered the 3D model and split it into 2-inch sections to correspond with our Ethafoam plank. The various layers were cut by CNC milling 10-pound Ethafoam plank and heat welding them together. The form returned to me to be smoothed by hand. Then I added a base layer of felt that further smooths the surface and adds a small amount of natural give to the form. Everything's then covered in stockinette and our show fabric, as you see it here. By combining skills and effort between conservation and exhibits production, the end result is a form that is the exact shape that we wanted, made with fewer man hours and less waste, and finished just in time for the event. Gene Kranz accepted his award in person and was reunited with his vest. I'm especially proud of this project because Gene said that he was happy to see it so well cared for, and even said that it looked cleaner than when he had last seen it. While I did undertake minor treatment on this vest, I didn't do any significant cleaning. If anything, I think that goes to show how much a mannequin can affect an object's interpretation. Ultimately, 3D scanning and CNC milling large forms wasn't practical, but we did find other applications for accessories, like for this outfit displayed in our We All Fly gallery. Smock outfits like these were worn by conservationists working with Operation Migration, an organization that aims to help replenish endangered bird populations. They teach endangered birds raised in captivity, like these whooping cranes, where to migrate by leading them on their migration paths using a Cosmos Phase 2 ultralight aircraft. The white outfits help disguise the humans, preventing the cranes from imprinting on them. They hold a crane hand puppet to blend in, and wear helmets under their hoods with goggles as additional protection, with the added bonus of making their body profile less recognizably human. For this display, the curator wanted the helmet that's worn under the hood displayed separately from the outfit. The outfit is custom made with the hood fitting tightly over the helmet and goggles resting snugly within the front of the helmet. In order to make sure the mannequin head profile was correct, we need to precisely replicate the helmet's shape. Like the vest, the custom carving was an option, but it would be time-consuming, and if I'm honest with myself, not 100% accurate. As before, I reached out to our Mountmakers and exhibits production, who 3D scanned the helmet, digitally rendered the form, and then CNC milled Ethafoam plank to replicate the helmet's shape and its voids, which were especially important to fit the goggles. The layers were heat welded and adhered together, and then the rough form was passed back to me for finishing. As you see it here. We also made a separate nose support for the goggles that could be inserted after everything was dressed, which held the goggles securely in that void at the front. This ended up being easier than building or rendering a nose on the form and safer during dressing. And here is the full outfit in our We All Fly gallery with the separately displayed helmet. I think the best example of conservation's quote-unquote soft forms and Mountmakers' hard forms is with spacesuits, which are more accurately referred to as pressure suits. Air and Space has the world's largest and most complete collection of spacesuits, currently totaling over 280. The designs have varied throughout space exploration history and come with some unique challenges. Spacesuits are essentially individual spacecraft in clothing form that need to contain the oxygen and water necessary for basic survival, regulate temperature and pressure, and protect the astronaut from the hazards of space. This is accomplished through many layers in close contact within the suits that all age differently. So our mannequin decisions are affected by some overarching condition considerations. Because the suits are a sealed pressure system, they can be very heavy and have interior tubing and bulky hardware that take up more space within the suits. The rubber components can become distorted and frozen in position over time, which can make it even more difficult to insert a mannequin. Any unstable polymer materials will continually off-gas, requiring ventilation within the suit. So gloves and helmets are often displayed close to, but not fully connected to the suits to leave an air gap. Depending on the suit design, they can be put on through the crotch, chest, or back, so access for anchoring the mannequin can vary. The safest way to mount many of our suits is to combine an internal mannequin with an external frame. We start with the internal support. Most pressure suits are displayed standing upright. The Dorfman Ethafoam Man has been a good base form because of its solid, heavier foam core and aluminum limb framing that can support these heavy suits. Because access is limited in each suit, we found it best to cut the mannequin's torso into several pieces, which can then be slotted in and skewered from the top or bottom with a central pole that keeps all of the pieces aligned. Pressure suits are essentially onesies with either soft feet or attached boots, so we also make attached or separately inserted toe pillows. Even after cutting the Ethafoam Man into pieces, there's limited room within the suits for the tools necessary to tighten the nuts on the stock Dorfman limb connections. We also found that we often needed to cut the arm and leg poles shorter to have space to maneuver them within the suits. To overcome this, our Mountmakers created aluminum plugs capped with magnets that can be inserted into the arm and leg poles and secured with a set screw. The limbs simply click into place on the torso. For the mannequins with poles to the crotch, our Mountmakers created a ring out of Delrin with an alignment pin that keeps all of the torsos in a fixed position on the pole. Even with full internal support, many suits cannot stand on their own or have external components like helmets and dangling cables that need additional supports. Typically, 3 to 4 capture points are used: a rod under each arm, a saddle seat for the crotch, and sometimes an extension off the frame's pole that captures the heavy neck rings where the helmets are attached. Our Mountmakers made a standardized modular frame system that can be used with multiple suit styles. The bases are custom welded to be larger than a standard Dorfman base to capture the full length of the suit's feet. The underarm rods are covered with polysuede, and the seat is covered with plastizote, which we prefer because it carves smoother and compresses less than Ethafoam, and has the added bonus of coming in black, which matches the rest of our mounts. The result is fully upright displays that more naturally mimic human posture with minimally obtrusive external frames. This mount system allows a garment intended for space to be safely displayed in gravity here on Earth. The final mannequin was an altered Dorfman Conservation form. This was for Marine Staff Sergeant Liam Dwyer, who served in Afghanistan and lost part of his left leg to an IED. He loves driving cars, and during his recovery process, met the director of Mazda Motorsports. Liam took to race car driving and now races for Mazda's Freedom Autosport team, using a specially made prosthetic to operate a manual car. His racing suit, prosthesis, and modified clutch pedal are featured in our Nation of Speed gallery. A bit of background terminology before I discuss the mannequin. A prosthesis is a man-made body part. It can connect to the body in different ways. Liam Dwyer uses a socket, which is a custom medical device fitted over the residual limb. Liam wasn't able to send us the socket that he used with this prosthesis. Because sockets are customized, they can cost thousands of dollars to make. We considered making our own using carbon fiber and resin, but a quick internet search showed me that we could get them secondhand for a fraction of the cost on eBay. And I got very lucky on eBay that day. This socket is for the correct leg, which was important because there's a pressure relief valve that needs to be at the front, It has the correct hardware receiver already integrated into the bottom, and it's narrow enough to fit within the suit's leg opening. The socket ended up being too tall for this mannequin, so our Mountmakers cut it down and polished the edge for me. This mannequin presented several challenges. The case design called for the mannequin to be standing off balance with the left leg and prosthesis forward and connected to the clutch pedal with a fairly narrow and shallow case. We chose to use the Dorfman Ethafoam Man because it was a good size fit for Liam's slim frame and has a more solid construction, which was helpful for both anchoring the off-balance stance and supporting the heavy helmet and prosthesis. Dorfman Ethafoam men and women come with a heel plate in the left foot, so Dorfman kindly accommodated our request to switch the heel post to the right foot when we ordered this mannequin. Once we determined how to keep the mannequin upright, we had to figure out how to connect the prosthesis to the mannequin. As you see here, the prosthesis connects to the socket with a specific piece of hardware, which we also did not have. Thankfully, one of the conservators on our transformation team was formerly a machinist, and we have a very well-equipped machine shop at the Udvar Hazy Center. He studied photographs to machine aluminum connector pieces matching the original hardware. One fits the threading on the purchased socket, and the other matches the square top of the prosthesis that secures with the quick release pin circled here. The leg angle posed the final challenge. Because one leg needed to be stepping forward, I worked with exhibits production to cut the Dorfman at the hip and bend an aluminum pole to the correct angle to keep the entire assembly fitting within the case without floating the clutch pedal up too high or tipping the mannequin too far to either side. With the help of a mount for the clutch pedal made by our Mountmakers, Liam Dwyer's entire outfit is now on display in our Nation of Speed gallery. These challenging Ethafoam mannequins ended up being valuable opportunities to highlight skills and build rapport across departments at NASM. Through our collaboration, we've created standardized supplemental mount pieces and alteration methods for the Dorfmans that I didn't have time to discuss here, and vastly improved the display and interpretation of our garments. We're taking the relationships that we've built and the lessons that we've learned forward into the East End as we wrap up NASM's transformation. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has helped with the mannequins over the past few years, especially to Chris and Tenzin in exhibits production, our volunteer Gretchen, and to my Objects and Conservator colleagues for all of their help and patience. NASM's mannequins are better because of everyone's hard work. And thank you all for being here.
So I think both Laura and I were totally nerding out on Jean Kranz's vest. That's so cool.
It's so cool. It's so cute, too. There's like a little signature from her in the pocket. It's really sweet.
I noticed one of the buttons was broken on the top. Is that from his use of it? Or?
Yeah, that's documented in the history of that object. So. Okay, any questions?
Allison, we have one question right there.
I'll field a question from the online audience first. How long did it take you to do the 3D scanning?
So it typically takes I think about 30 minutes. Really, really complicated objects, I think up to an hour. That scanning unit has just been really wonderful for a lot of the measuring. We baseline scan and measure every object going on display.
Yes, go ahead.
I had a really simple question, which is just, how long have you been working on the renovation of the museum, and when will it reopen?
How long, I'm sorry?
How long have you been working on the renovation of the galleries, and when will the museum reopen?
So Artifact Deinstallation started in 2017. We partially reopened in 2022 and will fully reopen in 2026 to correspond with the nation's 250th anniversary. But we'll be opening in phases on the East End throughout that. So I think next year we've got another phased reopening. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.